Welcome to the EntrePastors podcast on YouTube. This is a show that helps pastors think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the EntrePastors podcast. My name is John Sanders, here with my friend, Les Hughes, and together we make up the co-hosts of this thing called EntrePastors, and we are so delighted to have you joining us this week. Les, how's it going, man?
Indeed, we are very happy that folks would join us to listen in on our conversation today. Things are going good in my world. How about you?
Man, good. Maybe I can just share a quick story before we get too deep into the podcast today about something that's relevant in my business. I won't go deep into detail, but as you and I are recording this just happens to be a Thursday in the week, and the first 3 days of the week, Monday through Wednesday, myself and my oldest son were involved in a 3-day on the road, over the road job for my handyman business. That is not the normal type of work that we do. We moved for a customer, one of our valued previous customers, or past customers, I should say, reached out earlier in the spring and said, man, I'm probably asking for way too much with this. But we're moving to a second home in Indiana. He said, what would it take for me to have you guys come and load a moving truck, drive our stuff down there, spend an extra day doing a bunch of stuff to help us get settled in? And man, we agreed on a number, and it was not a small number. And it was a great opportunity just to hang out with my son, to make some money, to serve somebody. There was some real ministry opportunities that happened along the way. And it was cool. I'm back home now, a little bit tired, but glad to be back at it. So that's it's been a good week. When you ask how I'm doing, I'm sore and I'm tired and I'm fulfilled.
Yeah, it's been fun to watch that unfold. So I'm real glad that y'all had that chance, and it was just really neat to see how all the pieces came together, you know.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, hey, we're calling this episode, I think this is going to be like our 208th episode. By the way, one other thing, Les, we didn't talk about this before we went on air, but I just want to say to you, happy anniversary, because in literally 2 days is from the day of this recording, it will be August 31st, 2024, and that will be the 3-year anniversary of EntrePastors. So
how about that? Congratulations to you. Should I look for something real special in the mail, like
so
a
I was
gift
kind of
or
hoping
something?
I could be looking for something real special in the mail. So I guess we both
All
got
right.
nothing. So that's awesome. Way to go. Oh man, it's been a fun journey.
That's good.
And what you and I are going to talk about today in this episode, we're going to talk about pivotal moments in our EntrePastor journey. And really, Les, what I thought we could talk about is just both of us maybe share a story. I mean, there's probably lots of stories that we could, I know there is, because it wasn't just one thing that kind of led us down our individual paths that ultimately brought us together in this one path we call EntrePastors. But there were multiple kind of milestone moments, some pivotal moments that were defining in our points along the way. So let's just share those stories. And here's why I want to do that. For those that are listening, if you're new to the podcast, I want you to be able to relate to this, because sometimes we interview guests who are just crushing it. They're in pastoral ministry, plus they're out in the marketplace in some kind of business. They're thriving. And I remember being there in other places in my life where you see people that seemingly are just so farther down the road than you are, and you think, man, I'll never get there. And I want you to understand, like, it wasn't that long ago that Les and I are right where some of you are today. And there were some of we had those milestone moments, those defining moments where we said, no more of this. I'm doing it differently. And so that's kind of the goal, is just to relate to that part of the story for those in our audience and our community that might find themselves there. So Les, I'm going to let you go first, and just, what's one of those moments that stands out to you as a defining moment on your journey?
Yeah, I love this topic because I think everybody's going to be able to relate to this in one way or the other. But before I get to that pivotal moment in my life, I want to speak from the 35,000 foot view. All right. Because this is a core value of mine, and I believe it is yours, maybe in a different way. We'd put it differently, but this phenomenon is true no matter who you are, and no matter what field you're in, no matter what you do for a living, or what family background you're in, or your age. the principle that we're talking about today is true for everybody, and that is that very big doors turn on really small hinges.
Hmm.
And you never know what seemingly minor decision could end up having major implications in your life and those around you.
Hmm.
And for a different sort of illustration of that, think about the trajectory of right now. We got some astronauts that are kind of stranded in space. The math behind what they do and the calculations behind what they do are incredible, because a tiny variation in their trajectory in you know Cape Canaveral could mean miles off base or off target from where they intend to go. Just tiny little degrees, but it's just over a long period of time. So same way with a bullet. You've sighted in rifles before. So if you sight in a rifle at 60 yards or 100 yards, and it is just a couple inches off, by the time that bullet gets to 200 or 300 yards, it's going to be way, way off from the target. And so it's those small little the things that seem like they're small little measurements or increments now, over the course of years or decades, they could have huge results.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm thinking about a specific time when, we were, my wife's name is Paige, for those that maybe haven't been listening for very long. And Paige and I were between ministries at the time, and we'd had some incredible success in the places that we had been. And we'd had some stumbles along the way too, just in terms of things not working out the way that we thought that they would and wanted them to. So we were open to something new, something different, and something entrepreneurial. And John, I had no clue. I mean, zero of like first steps. I didn't know anybody who was really doing what I wanted to do. We hadn't met one another at that point in time. And so I began to do some research and homework in the form of listening to podcasts that I would trust that were on that topic, and then getting involved in some communities and networking some, just to try to educate myself. And then there was one thing that came along that I felt like could get me to where I was really wanting to go. But man, it took a major financial investment that we didn't have at the time to spend on that. Obviously, we had it because I spent it, but it wasn't for that, you
Yeah.
know? And so I just sensed in my spirit, though, John, that it was the right thing to do. And I'm not a shoot from the hip kind of person, really. I don't mind taking calculated risks, but I'm kind of a control freak when it comes to that. And I want a sure thing. I want to be able to do the math and say, if this happens and this happens, then this is going to be the result. And this particular thing I'm talking about wasn't like that. It was mainly investing in a coach and investing in a community that I believed, because of the testimonials and because of I mean, I wasn't just it wasn't a blind leap of faith. It was a leap of
Sure.
faith, but it
Sure.
wasn't a blind leap of faith, but it was still not a guarantee. I had no idea, okay, that that decision to make that leap of faith would lead me in many ways to some of the most significant successes that I've had in our business today. Okay. And that individual, that community, that group has nothing to do personally in a personal way with what we're doing right now. Okay. And the successes that we have right now. But there's a path, is what I'm trying to say, that I can directly trace from that decision to now.
Mm.
And here's what I would say to that, and to the person that's listening. I'm going to ask you really to, if you're taking a walk right now, or you're driving, or you're distracted in some way, please listen to what's going to come next, because in retrospect, this is absolutely true. Man, I did not know it several years ago. This is in 2018. Okay, so whenever you're listening to this, It's 2024, summer of 2024. Labor Day weekend, we're getting ready to come up on it. But here's what I know now, John. I used to think, let me tell you what I used to think, and it wasn't quite accurate. I used to think, well, how do I know which of those small decisions is going to have those huge implications? You know, I had no idea when I moved from Kentucky down to North Mississippi to take a job related position, a promotion. It just seemed like a random decision that was a pretty good idea at the time. I had no idea that I would meet my wife at that place, my soon to be wife in that place.
Mm-hmm.
And that, I mean, now we've got the 15th grandkid on the way. So future generations,
Mm.
okay, are impacted by that one decision I made as a whatever 20-year-old kid, you know, when I moved from the state, the only place I'd ever lived down down south. And it seemed like I thought at the time, if it didn't work out, I can move back. If I don't like it, I'll move back. Give me a year, whatever. No, man, I stayed
Mm.
for the most part. So here's what I would say. The wisdom for that I would say to my 20-year-old self, I would say, don't look for that for that thing that may be one of those pivotal moments. But as much as you are able to, treat everything like it could be one of those pivotal moments. Okay? Because it
Say
really
more
could
about that.
be.
I think I'm tracking with you, but help me put some more words around that. So how do I'm hearing you say, don't look for one of those, like maybe don't try to force that or read too much into
Yeah.
everything, but also
Yeah.
recognize that every one of these things could have massive implication down the road.
Yes.
That is that a fair summary?
Because you could churn and toil and really worry and fret. Oh my goodness. Is this going to be what's going to happen, you know, if I do this, or if I don't do it, if I don't follow up with this person, or if I don't go to this meeting, or if I don't, you know, go to this event, or you know, if I don't make this phone call. I mean, you could drive yourself crazy doing that. But just, I think a great example of this, John, would be our friend Vincent Puglisi,
Mm-hmm.
because Vincent is, you know, he's not really kind of a life of the party, gregarious sort of person. Like if you're in the room with Vincent and there's a lot of things going on, he's not one of those people who's looking around the room to see who else is there. He's dialed in to you. You think that you're the only person around, but he's like that with virtually everybody, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because he truly does believe in the impact of that one conversation,
Mm.
the potential implications of that one encounter, or that one phone call, or that one that one Zoom call, or that one webinar, you know, whatever it however it manifests itself. So I would say treat each day as though something could happen. And this is a matter of faith too, John. Like we're people of faith. People listening are people of faith. If you truly believe that God's got his hand at work in your life, and he's working upstream in a providential way to orchestrate some events, some relationships, some friendships, some encounters, some conversations for his glory and your good, then you treat each day like that.
Mm. Unless, as soon as you said that, this went through my head, and I'm not joking at all when I say this. For some of you, that voice that God, those relationships that God could be bringing into your life upstream of some things that are yet to come, could very well be the fact that you're listening to this podcast right now. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, could it be that God has brought you across our path for such a time as this to prepare you for taking some action steps that are going to lead to some of these things down the road? Like this could be that thing for you. This could be part of your pivotal moment. So I don't want to overstate that, but I also don't want to understate it. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that you're listening to this right now, because maybe there's an invitation that God's opening a door for you to say, there's other ways that you can, you know, provide for your family and serve me. And that doesn't mean you have to quit being a pastor, but it can look different maybe than what you were told it had to look like or thought it needed to look like.
Yeah, that's well put. It's a lot of wisdom in that, and I want you to weigh in and share your experience as well. So I would wrap it up and some kind of summarize it in this way: that person that I mentioned that really this whole journey started. Like, that person, for all intents and purposes, is not even in my life anymore. It's not a bad thing. Nothing negative happened. It's just that we're doing different things, and I could send an email or shoot a text, and at some point in time, sooner or later, he would respond. And so there's no angst there. It's just that it's just the trajectory has been different. But my point in all of that is that I'm not saying that encounter back then and that relationship back then has a direct ongoing ROI in my life today directly. But what I can do is I could go back and connect the dots,
Mm-hmm.
probably 6 or 7 dots from that very first conversation that we had to today, to present day. And if we want to make it tangible, to present day prosperity and present day streams of revenue and income that are many times, John, many times what that initial investment was, that I thought at the time was, honestly, I thought it was kind of ridiculous. And I felt a little stupid doing it,
Mm.
just because it was like, wow, man, something's got to happen here. We're toast. And it,
Yeah.
and it did, man. And God provided. My goodness, we were blessed in so many ways. So I can directly connect the dots from that point in time. And really, if I want to just go back even beyond that, like further back than that, it goes even before that. Like that wasn't day one. There were some events
Sure.
that led up to that as well. So I would say, rather than look for that pivotal moment that's going to just rock your world and make all the difference, kind of treat every day like that and believe. Here's where the faith comes in. You're believing that the Lord is going to use those conversations and those encounters and even those small investments or large investments on your part. God's going to use all of them to accomplish what he wants to accomplish in your life.
Well, Les, one of the things I love about that you just said, and I want to highlight it, is that it isn't just one massive pivotal moment. It's a lot of them. It's a whole string of them. It's a chain of them. And maybe at times you feel like that, pinball in the pinball machine that's bouncing from one moment to the next. It's not always on just this really clean upward trajectory. Sometimes it's, over here and then over there and back to here,
Mm-hmm.
and you're bouncing around a little bit.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
in hindsight, you can look back and go, "Oh wow, what a beautiful picture that made, that brought me to where I am." But sometimes in the season, you don't even know that this is a big part of the story. And so I love that. And as you're telling that part of your story, and I've heard you share some of that before, I'm like, yeah, man, I have a similar thing. That's not the one I'm going to share, but basically, the summary that I would wrap up what you're saying with is, one of your pivotal moments on your EntrePastor journey was taking the courageous, faith-filled action step of investing into your own self through a coach and a community that maybe that in and of itself did not completely move the needle, but you look back and see this direct line where
Mm-hmm.
you are where you are today. And I think it's fair to say, if that had never happened with you, I don't know that you and I meet each other later down the road in Dan
Absolutely.
Mastermind.
That's right.
So, and
It
that's
directly
true
it
also.
directly led to that.
Yeah, that's
It
true also
directly
of
led
my
to that.
my
Mm-hmm.
story as well, of the investment that I made into coaching. Had it not been for that, I wouldn't have met you either in Dan Miller's group. So and so yeah, that just makes me think about multiple other stories that I could share of mine.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah,
here's
and just if you don't mind, John,
yeah,
before
go
you
ahead.
jump in there, I want to make sure I'm clear on this. If you people that know the world that we're talking about, if they would have looked from the outside in at the decision that I made, they would have said, and even at the time, they would have said, "Bro, that is a very, very wise decision you just made." I'm not saying it was not foolish at all. I'm just saying it. I felt it is what I'm
Yep.
telling you. It was not in the world that I was used to playing in.
Yep.
It was just a different world for me. So that part of it was a leap of faith. But believe, I'm not saying that people not to do your homework, not to do some research. I'm not saying make a shoot from the hip kind of decision. I did all of those things. I'm just I'm just saying that it was definitely a different world and out of my comfort zone at the time.
Yeah. Oh, that's good, man. I'll share two kind of stories because they blend together. And this is not just a one moment in time. This is both of these are kind of in a season, if you will, that culminated into a decision where I'm like, man, I'm doing something different. So one of them, we just shared this literally yesterday on our EntrePastors starter call, which is our $9 a month subscription, our community where we meet once a month and go through some of our pastors' roadmap to financial freedom. And yesterday we were on a call with that group talking about the idea of permission. And I shared this story. I'll just kind of recap it here, share a few details from it. But there was a season in my life. This was long before I saw myself as an entrepreneur or as someone who was going to be in business. I mean, at that time of my life, I was a full-time pastor. We had planted a church. We had launched multiple locations of that church. Again, I didn't know I was an entrepreneur. I didn't really connect the entrepreneurial dots of what, the skill set, the gifting that God was using for that to happen. But I was very focused on life as a full-time pastor. And then this really crazy opportunity came along. Part of my story is that before I went into full-time pastoring, vocational ministry, I was a full-time firefighter. That was what I thought my dream was for my career, and God allowed me to have that. And then he called me away from it, and I really wrestled with that, and went and finally surrendered, submitted to that calling that I sensed to preach the gospel. And so, fast forward many years, I've left the fire service. That in my mind is kind of a chapter that's in the rearview mirror. It was a great season, loved the guys I worked with. I didn't really ever see myself working again as a full-time career firefighter. And then fast forward like 11 years into the story of our church planting journey and all of that, kind of out of nowhere, here comes an opportunity for me to do that. And rather than feeling resistance from my closest inner circle, which in this case would be like my wife, I figured she would shut the whole thing down going, that's crazy. There's no way. She said, I think you could do it. I think you could do both, pastor and be a firefighter. And so that led me on a year-long process where I put in an application. I began the testing process with the city of Sioux Falls, thinking the whole time this probably isn't, because I'm breaking the rules in my mind. Like, full-time pastors who have a full-time income don't go apply for another full-time job. And so there was a tension that was starting to grow there. But the really weird thing about it, Les, was that I had an incredible sense of peace as far as my walk with Jesus went. Where I didn't know if I had peace or not yet was, what are the people going to think? What are church people going to think? What are my pastor friends going to think if they see me, this full-time pastor that's been casting a vision for this, full-time multi-site church? Now he's going to go be a firefighter. What's that about? So as I progressed through that hiring process, there was, and as it became a little more clear that, man, you really have a shot at this. Like, you keep making it through some of these rounds. For a while, I just kind of kept that in quiet because it's like, if it doesn't materialize, I don't want to, shake everything up and make everyone uneasy. But as it became more apparent, like, you are probably actually going to get a call and an invitation to step into this opportunity, I started to, communicate that, starting with my inner circle, my leadership team, our staff, and then, some key volunteers. And eventually I really felt led to, like, I need to go to the church, to the people. And I started to have a kind of a systematic process by which I was meeting with our church folks just in small groups to share my life with them, to share this opportunity. And here's what I would say to them. I would say, I don't need your permission to say yes to this and to go do this, but I'm asking for your blessing, because it would have been really hard for me to say yes and push forward if I had a whole bunch of people behind me saying, we're leaving the church. We think this, you're sinning. This is bad, whatever. And I'm grateful to report that by and large, my church was really supportive of it. I'm not saying they were all excited about it, so don't hear that. Some were very supportive, and others were just like, okay, but I did receive their blessing. But here's the thing. This is the first story that I'll tell. It was in that season where my wife and I would take a lot of long walks together and just kind of talk about, what if this happens? How are we going to do this? Do two things at the same time. And I've found myself saying, what if they say no? What if they shut that down? How would I respond to leading a church that essentially tells me, John, you don't have permission to accept this opportunity. And especially when I'm feeling tremendous peace, like the Lord is saying, John, if you want it, here it is. Like you left this for me in obedience. And if you want it, I'm giving it back. Because that's really what I sense God was saying to me. And so in my mind, I kind of fast forwarded to like the end of my life and just had this vision play out in my head of like, what would it look like someday years from now as a wrinkly old man to be laying on my deathbed, looking back over my life saying, man, I had an opportunity to live an adventure. I had an opportunity to step into an incredible story, and I said no to it because I was afraid of offending Gladys. And there was never a lady in my church named Gladys, but she's my, caricature that I've made to just represent kind of all things crotchety church people. So what if I would have said no because I don't want to offend other people or not live into the narrative that they would want for my life? That was a huge part of my story. Now, that's not really entrepreneurial to just go work a second full-time job. And one of the things, by the way, in that season I'm also wrestling with is, oh my goodness, like between these two full-time jobs, I might actually make over $100,000 a year. And that tripped me up for a while. It's like I had never made that kind of money ever in my life, never saw myself making an income like that as a pastor. So again, that's kind of laying some groundwork for further down the road, this whole EntrePastors thing. But here's the other part. That was one story. The other kind of pivotal moment or milestone moment for me in that journey, Les, is there was a season a few years later. Now here I am, full-time pastoring, leading this church, full-time firefighting, trying to figure out, just that whole thing of making those two worlds work together. And for the most part, I think we did a pretty good job of that. But our church started to go into a financial skid, like hard, for several years. And it was a multifaceted storm. We had some things in our local farming market that really rocked some of our givers who were in the ag community that were faithful givers. And all of a sudden now they're not really able to give because they're not making any money. We had some of our significant giving units, some of our families who were just faithful givers with good incomes moved away with their careers, moved out of state. And all of a sudden we're looking down the barrel of we have to start cutting and cutting and cutting some more. And I remember we got to the place where it was one of the most miserable days in my pastoral journey where we had to cut deep into staff to the point of like we're eliminating jobs from our church. And as we're doing that, both myself and my executive pastor, who represented probably the biggest share of the salary budget, recognize like we have to be a part of this cut. Like we can't just cut everyone else and us keep this. And so we cut so deep that I remember not too much longer after that I'm now adjusting to this new salary. And by the way, praise God for his provision ahead of time, right? By lining up this other career, this fire career.
Exactly.
But
That's
here's
right.
the thing, man. What I came to realize is here I am working two full-time jobs. I'll just let you in on a little secret for those of you that are pastors. Being a firefighter doesn't pay a whole lot better either. I guess I'm drawn to these jobs that are serving others and not getting paid very well. In the fire service, you get some decent benefits, but the cash salary that you bring home, especially when you're starting out, is not just incredible. And so I've got two kind of mediocre incomes. I'm working my butt off, two full-time jobs. And you all know as full-time pastors, like, I don't care what you do on the side, you are carrying that weight and that pressure and that burden. And it was a breaking point. I think that if I were to summarize that part of the story or that pivotal moment, it was a breaking point of coming to a place of just being sick and tired of this, saying, I'm working two full-time jobs and I'm barely making one full-time income to support my family. And then here's a little side thing that I would add to that. And nobody cares. Like nobody's coming alongside of Pastor John saying, bro, are you okay? Like we've cut things significantly. It was, and I don't say that with any bitterness. I love the people that I was leading in that season. I don't think there was no malice on anybody's part. Nobody was celebrating the fact that our income had gotten so significantly cut. But on the flip side, they also just wasn't on their radar to care about it. So it's not that there's bitterness attached with that. It's, I think for me, what I took away from that is it's up to me to figure this out. Like God has given me some resources, some abilities, some tools. And that's when I really started to think about shifting. And again, I still in that season, Les, I didn't have all the verbiage of EntrePastors. You and I hadn't met. We hadn't made up the word EntrePastors yet. So, but some of the some of the foundational blocks were being laid in that part of the story where I'm going, okay, I think we're going to do this differently. And I didn't have the answers. I didn't know what it would look like. I just knew I reached that point, as Dave Ramsey would say, of being sick and tired of being sick and tired. And I'm not doing this anymore. So that may not be a real cheery, upbeat story, but I share it to connect with pastors that are listening to this right now going, that's where I'm at, man. Like, we're living in a time that economically things are tough. If you've been on a, kind of low end of a church salary anyway, that haven't seen much cost of living increases, that aren't keeping up with inflation, I promise you're feeling this. And so maybe you are where
Yeah.
I was. So hopefully that's an encouragement to someone listening going, wasn't really that long ago that John was in that place. And today life is so much different. It's so much better. And I have so much more hope in that area than I did for many, many years as a pastor.
Yeah, and we've also got people that are listening and that tune in who don't have that vocational ministry background, and not been a church employee or nonprofit organization or something, but they share the same, love for the kingdom and for the gospel and living that purpose driven life, in that way.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing to hear about all of what you were saying is that we really do, it comes down to a choice or choices to make. And it's a matter of really, you mentioned coming to that place of peace for yourself as well. And that's a big part of it. Like, you can't only go by that. I've had people tell me that they've been at peace with the decision, and I knew that decision was absolutely an unbiblical decision.
Yeah.
It's like, I wasn't judging them. I was just going on what the scripture says and what they were saying. And it's like, bro, you can have peace about that if you want to, but I don't know where it's coming from, because it's not coming from God. So,
Yeah. Amen.
but there is something to it, man. If you're really walking with the Lord, and I do mean walking with the Lord, and you've got that sense of discernment, about what He's really required of you. It is a factor. It's not the only factor, but it's a factor.
Yeah.
So here's the decision that it really comes down to. The decision is to rely upon, for all intents and purposes, rely upon a job or a career or a W-2 or an employer for our for that livelihood, and have all your eggs in that basket and be all in. That shows some faith. It shows some faith in some human beings that may be on a committee or in a position that's making those kinds of administrative decisions and personnel decisions. It shows a lot of faith in the Lord that He's going to continue to provide in that way. So we can, in a general way, we can believe that, man, God's going to provide somehow.
Right.
But we can also believe that God's going to provide in this way only.
Mm-hmm.
It's still a matter of us trusting that He's going to provide. It's just, how might He do that? So that's the decision, is to lock in there, so that if that goes away, like in your case, if that goes away, you've got a decision to make. And your decision is to stay and tough it out, hoping that it gets better, hoping that it turns around, or adjust your lifestyle in such a dramatic way that your needs go down, which is a tough road to go down. It's possible.
Mm.
Maybe some people should, but that's a tough road to go down, to sell possessions, sell your home, go into a rental, go into a smaller house. You know what I mean? Drive
Right. And the
around.
truth is, most pastors are kind of already there anyway. I mean,
Yeah, there's
there's
not
exceptions.
much. That's exactly right. When you're at that place, there's not many places you can go
Right.
and really survive. So that's one world that you can have, or there's a different path. That path causes you to be a little more creative, to expand your world, to expand that territory, to do some homework, to be educated, maybe not a formal education, but a different kind of education, and see what other possibilities. Look at those same skill sets, or maybe even more skill sets that you can develop, that you used in that job, in that W-2, in that employee, position in a different way,
Yeah.
in a different world. And that's the other path that a lot of people don't go down, John, if we're honest, because they're afraid to do that,
Yeah.
and afraid with what's at stake.
As I hear you saying that, Les, I'll wrap up with this thought. Actually, two quick thoughts. One is I was having this conversation with a friend the other day who's really been on a financial journey and kind of going down the Dave Ramsey thing, which I think is great. Like he's really getting his financial house in order, cutting spending, budgeting, making his money obey and work for him. And that's all fine and well. But the conversation, specifically the part I wanted to highlight, is where I was telling him there comes a point that you need to start, once you've learned to be disciplined with your money and you've cut and you're living on less than you make. At some point you need to shift gears and start thinking about building wealth. And that's a conversation many pastors almost never get to. And what I said to him specifically, I said there's really two sides of the economic coin, if it all boils down to your income and your outgo. And a lot of times, like the Dave Ramsey model is really focused heavily on the outgo, like let's limit the spending. And that's great. There's a time and a place for that. But I told him where I am in this season of life right now, I said, I'm maybe wanting to put about 25% of my focus on the outgo in terms of limiting and cutting and keeping an eye on what's being spent. And I said, I'm putting about 75% or more into the income. And I'm in a season of saying I've lived for years on far less than a lot of other people. And I don't say that with any bitterness or resentment or regret, other than to say a lot of that was self-induced and I'm done with it. And I'm building some streams of revenue now through entrepreneurialism. And it has been so life-giving. And I love, the other night I took a friend out for supper and was able not only to pick up the check, but I'm getting to that place of life where I don't look immediately to the price on the menu and go, whatever, well, maybe I'll just get the chicken tonight. I feel like a ribeye, I'm getting a ribeye, praise God,
Yeah.
and you want an
Yeah.
appetizer? I got your appetizer. Like,
Yeah.
I don't want that to sound boastful or arrogant. It's just a place that I've not lived for many, many years of my life. And I think it's available. So for our audience listening to this, maybe this is a pivotal moment for you. Maybe this is going to be one of those milestone moments or one of those hinge moments, going back to something, the metaphor Les used earlier, that a big door is getting ready to swing open. And we've got multiple ways that you can engage with our community. In a minute, Les, I'm going to ask you to tell them about the Get Started guide. But, we've got varying levels from free resources all the way up to some paid communities. If you want to get on a fast track to getting a business launched and get some revenue coming in, we've got multiple options that we can do that with. But if you're brand new listening to this and thinking, man, I just want to get started, Les, how do they go about getting our Get Started guide?
All right, I'm going to give it to you first, and then backtrack just for a second and share something that's just on my heart as well. So, if you want to find a place to start, okay, just go to EntrePastors.com/start. EntrePastors.com/start, and that'll get you going. And along with that Get Started guide, there are about 50 or maybe even more than 50 ideas, John, that somebody can look at and just sort of get the juices flowing. If you want a place to start, that's where I would say. Now, having said that, if we don't want to ever just be talking about some things without giving some potential solutions. We're not just talking and, hey, that sounds great, some pretty decent ideas. Now I got to figure out what I need to do. That's not what we want. We want to help you and by coming up with these calls to action. So one call to action, if you're just getting started, is to get that Get Started guide. But it could be that you're farther down the road than that, or it could be that you're even before that and you just have some questions and you've got some things that you think are unique to you that you want some feedback for. Then please feel free to reach out to one or both of us. You can email us. John is John, Jon, at EntrePastors.com. Mine is Les, Les, at EntrePastors.com. And your starting place may be unique to you. Like everybody's at a different spot. If somebody were to ask us, what do I need to do? Because that Get Started guide is not for me, then I would say, tell me where you are, and then we can give you some suggestions on some calls to action for you. So your situation may be very, very unique, probably is. Then if that's the case, please don't be sitting there a year from now wringing your hands or worrying about some of the same stuff. At least reach out, send us an email, set up a call or something where we can just talk it through, and then you can come up with some ideas on your own. It may just be that we can serve as a catalyst to get you thinking a little bit. Does that make sense, John?
Yeah, very well said. And we'd love to jump on a call and help you just kind of get a good starting place. So Les, it's been fun hanging out with you, man. Thanks for sharing your story,
Always.
a little bit of your journey, and God bless. Thank you guys for tuning in and listening. We will see you on next week's episode. Take care. Well, hey, thanks for watching this episode of the EntrePastors podcast. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you can be notified every time we release a new episode. If you'd like to get connected to other pastors who are learning to think, act, and thrive as prosperous entrepreneurs, then we invite you to check us out on Facebook. Just search for the EntrePastors Connect group, answer a few of our simple questions there, and we'd love to include you in the conversations. And if you're really ready to go to the next level, then we invite you to join our EntrePastors membership community. When you become a monthly subscriber, you will receive access to courses, exclusive community, and coaching that will help you along in your own EntrePastors journey. If there's anything else we can do to serve you, please visit us at EntrePastors.com, and we will do our best to serve you there. God bless everybody. See you soon.